really quick hello. Welcome to February. And the first book I finished this month, Mississippi Jack, which is the 5th book of the Bloody Jack Adventures series. And I am making a live blog video, so I'm really just like not going to talk about this book much here, but I liked it and that's all I have to say. Hello. Isaac's Storm by Erik Larson. So this is a nonfiction book about the Galveston hurricane of 1900. And I enjoyed it. I have read a whole bunch of Erik Larson's books in the last few years. I started with Devil in the White City, I think. Well, actually, no, I probably didn't start with it. Whatever. The point is that he's the guy who wrote Devil in the White City. And he's also written a bunch of other books. And he has another one that I think is coming out this year. But I've listened to all of them on audiobook just because, like, that's a really easy way to read. I can't fucking speak. Because it's an easy way to read nonfiction. And, okay, so, in 1900, the city of Galveston, Texas was poised to be a big deal. It was growing really quickly, and it and Houston were kind of battling it out over who was going to be the big Texas coast city. And then Galveston was hit by a hurricane that killed at least 6,000 people and basically destroyed the city, and so Houston wins. But, yeah, this book is about that hurricane, and it's about this, guy who worked for the United States, like, Climate Weather Bureau or whatever. I guess it's the Weather Bureau. It doesn't actually say on the back, so this is not helpful. But anyway, this is, like, I think the earliest of Erik Larson's books that I have much interest in reading. He wrote a couple even longer ago, earlier in the 90s, that I'm not interested in. Like, it's a good book, but I would say that it's certainly not my favorite. But I do find interesting the topics that he picks for his books, and this one's no exception. I like his books, and I liked this book. And I think he picks interesting topics. They're all kind of set in this, maybe a 50-year time span, kind of just period of time that he seems to find particularly interesting. But anyway, so I've never read any books about hurricanes before, so that was cool. I really didn't know much about this hurricane at all. The only reason I even knew it happened was because I knew about this book. Amazing. And, yeah, I don't know. There's plenty of Erik Larson's books that I would say that I liked more than this one. Honestly, I'd probably rate this pretty low because, like, it's an earlier book and that's just, I don't know, I kind of felt like it could have been longer, for one thing. It was quite short, and I was just like, well, I want more. I want way more information about all of this. Also, and this is not the book's fault, obviously, but being from 1999, I think, means that, like, obviously it can't talk about any of the hurricanes that have happened in the last few years. Like, I think that it would be really interesting to read something that compares the Galveston hurricane to Hurricane Katrina or to Hurricane Harvey. But, you know, naturally both of those happened after this book was published, so it couldn't, but that's fine. And I didn't find Isaac Klein to be a terribly interesting person either. Like, he is basically the head of the U.S. Weather Bureau's office in Galveston, and it's through his eyes that we see at least some of the stuff happen when the hurricane... I mean, the most interesting thing to me really was the segment of the book where the hurricane is actually striking, because what it did is it sent a huge surge of water from the Gulf onto the city of Galveston and got to the point where it was, like, it destroyed all of these houses near the beachfront, and at the time, Galveston didn't have a seawall, and, like, everything that the book describes about how Galveston was built and arranged is just like, guys, this is all such a bad idea. Like, it's funny, you know, considering how many cities are built in places where it's just like, at some point, this is just gonna be destroyed by something, and people are like, that won't happen, or then it does, and they're just like, we'll just rebuild. People are stupid, but also it's kind of admirable how stupid people are, I think, in a way. Like, I guess if you didn't take hurricanes and earthquakes and just everything into stride and go, you know what, fuck it, we're gonna do it anyway, you'd never get anything done. But, like, personally, I wouldn't want to live in Galveston. I mean, it sounds nice, but, like, I don't want to live anywhere where hurricanes strike, ever. So, yeah, I don't like that idea. They're scary. But, yeah, so that was a really devastating hurricane, is my point, and, like, my favorite part of the book was when the hurricane was hitting, and there was just, like, 200-mile-an-hour winds and a fuck ton of water from the ocean just pouring into the city and destroying the buildings and killing everybody, and it was very disturbing and sad, but also interesting. So, yeah, whatever. Generally got out of this book pretty much what I was hoping to. So, yeah, I think, well, actually now I've read all of Erik Larson's books that I want to read, with the exception of the one that's apparently coming out this year, which is about Churchill, which is, like, not a topic I'm terribly interested in. But I'm gonna read it because at this point it's like, it's Erik Larson, so it'll probably be good. I'd like to learn at least about Churchill's family, and it's supposed to be set during, like, 1 year, I think, of during World War II, which obviously is, like, one of the more interesting periods of time, but, like, you know, it's also, like, I feel like I know a lot about it, but I probably really don't. So, anyway, that's for future me. For now, glad I read this. Hello. I have finished Moon Boots and Dinner Suits by John Pertwee. Yes. I liked this book. Okay, this is an autobiography of John Pertwee, who was an actor, and I know him because he was on Doctor Who in the early 1970s. And this book is mostly about his early years of life. He doesn't talk about Doctor Who, like, at all. It's about his childhood and going to school and being in the Navy and getting into acting. And then their chapter at the end is mostly about the Navy Lark, which was some, like, radio show that he was on for a million years. And helped invent, you know, like, it was his thing. And it ran for, like, a ridiculously long amount of time. I found this book to be fun. I thought it was really charming. And it's mostly in chronological order, although he does jump around a bit and tells just all these anecdotes about his life, which are often funny. A few of them are just kind of sad, but mostly they're funny. Or they're, at the time, sad, but he tells them in a funny way. I don't know how much of this I actually believe. I mean, most of it, but, like, there are a few stories where I'm like, John, I don't think so. I think you're just telling a joke. But, yeah, gosh, I don't know how much of it to tell you about, really. Like, he was in the Navy, and, that was during World War II, I guess I should specify. But I don't know, like, it didn't really involve that much fighting. They were mostly hanging around Scotland and the Isle of Man, like, waiting for the Germans to attack, in case they did. And And it's just a lot about him being like, I went to all these different schools and I kept getting kicked out because I was bad at being at school. And I wanted to be an actor. And then a bunch of stuff about him like trying to get a job and all these variety of like attractive young women he met at various times, and a few girlfriends, and a lot of his friends that he made who are all very interesting, strange people. And this story where he's like, I met Haile Selassie once, and you're like, what? And like a lot of stuff, just if you're familiar with the kind of group of British actors who were in especially theater and radio in the, I guess, 40s, 50s, 60s, you will recognize names in here. I didn't really. I was like, I don't know who these people are. He'd be like, this person's famous, and I'm like, okay. Of course, there were several times where he was like, this guy became prime minister later, and I'm like, okay. I've never heard of him, but hey, I'm not British, so I don't need to have. I'm like, was he on The Crown? Because if he wasn't, I haven't heard of him. Oh god. I'm sure if anybody British is watching this, and it's horribly embarrassing, but you know what? I know all the presidents of my country, so I don't need to know the prime minister of yours. Yeah, but I really enjoyed this. My sister gave this to me for Christmas. It was a book I wanted, but I wasn't really expecting to get. Yes, it was wonderful. I also like, there's the picture on the back. This is him and his wife Ingeborg, who like is mentioned in this book a few times, but like the book ends kind of before a lot of things in his life happened, like before he meets her and has kids and stuff. So like, I don't know, but but like I said, he tells it in kind of jumps around a bit. So there are a few little stories he tells about his kids, despite the fact that the chronological part of the book doesn't get to there. There's also Jesus fuck. There's pictures in the middle, so that's kind of fun. There's pictures of his parents, and I love this picture of his aunt, this elegant portrait of his aunt, because like they look so related. But there's just also like a lot of picture of you know, of him. Oh, another funny random tidbit is that like, so his father married his stepmother at some point when he was a kid, and this woman already had a son. So the funny part is that you've got John, and then he had an older brother, Michael, and this other kid's name was also Michael. So it's like he had two brothers named Michael. And pictures of like him and in acting things, and the HMS Hood at its best. He served on the Hood, but was fortunately transferred off of it right before the fatal confrontation with the Bismarck that sank the Hood and killed a bunch of people that he'd been talking about, so that's distressing. Here's like, I don't know, the Navy Lark. Here's a bunch of people I've never heard of. And I genuinely don't know. I think they made, well, he says they made a movie that he's not even in, and it's like not good. But, okay. I think that's enough. I think I can shut up now, but I really liked this book, and I'm really glad I got a chance to read it, because it seemed to me maybe a little harder to get one's hands on. And my sister bought it on some used books website, and it was like the only copy that wasn't really expensive because it's not signed, and the other ones were. And I was like, well, obviously I don't care about that. I just want the book. So, wonderful. Glad I read it. The end. We're done. Hello. I have finished last night A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. I really liked this. I thought it was wonderful. It is a science fiction book, kind of a space opera, or at least that's how Anne Leckie describes it in this blurb, so sure, whatever. About a big space empire and an ambassador from a smallish space station who is sent to the capital of the big space empire. And when she gets there, she discovers that her predecessor has died, and she immediately thinks, murder. And then what follows is a lot of political intrigue and her kind of trying to figure out how to navigate her new job. Plus, it's complicated further by the fact that her people have a practice that they call, like, oh, I don't know what they call it exactly, but they have these devices they call an imago, and it's basically something they put in the back of their skull, which contains the memories and personalities of certain people in the line before them. So she's chosen to be the next ambassador, and they put an outdated imago of the previous ambassador into her head, because it's the only one they have, because he hasn't been back to their planet, or their space station, in like 20 years. So unfortunately, it starts malfunctioning. And so she's trying to deal with the fact that she doesn't have the knowledge of this ambassador that she should have, while also not being able to tell anybody on this planet because they don't know about this whole deal. So there's just like a lot going on, and I really liked it. That the author is really trying to capture the idea. Well, okay, she puts it really well in her dedication. She says, "This book is dedicated to anyone who has ever fallen in love with a culture that was devouring their own." And that's like so much what is happening in this book. Also, look at this cover. Okay, I'm sorry it's being shiny, but this is this throne that the Emperor of Texkalan sits on, and it's like just this picture alone made me want to read the book, honestly. Okay. Also, if you need more fun info, like there's the beginnings of a female romance. And actually, all the characters specifically in a relationship at some point, and there's only a few of them. Like, there's only a few relationships that happen or happened that are relevant to the story, are queer. All of them. I mean, like, there's only like 3, but still. And, because that's like not what's important to the story, but you do eventually get this information. And also there's a slow burn, kind of simmering beginnings of a love story. I say it's slow burn because it takes most of the book to get to a point where it kind of comes out in the open. But also this book takes place over the course of like a week. So it's not really slow burn, but like I figure it's close enough, because I figure slow burn is like the time that passes while you're reading it, not necessarily the time that passes in the book, if you know what I mean. Whatever. A lot of stuff is happening. Who cares? It worked for me, so it must not have been too fast. But yeah, so like this book is fantastic and it's gorgeous, and I found the Space Empire terribly fascinating, and it's just really interesting how kind of the ambassador, Mahit Dismar, is also fascinated by them, but while at the same time constantly aware that they will always consider her a barbarian, even the ones that like her. And it's like, ah. So it's a lot. It's really great. It's really cool also how the Empire, like the way that the people look and some of the words that they use, including the name of the Empire itself, seems to come from like Aztec kind of deal. Like the descriptions of kind of the ideal member of the society really sound like some of those old drawings of Aztecs. Those almost cartoon drawings that they made, you know what I'm talking about, maybe? I don't know. But it's pretty cool. It's really like a fantastic book. And I also, this is just another random aside, I really enjoy the way that the Texkalanli, like, people name themselves. Well, they don't name themselves, but the way that they name their children, all of their names are a number and a noun. So, like, some of the characters in this book are named 1 Lightning, 12 Azalea, 3 Seagrass, 19 Adza. I don't know what an Adza is. It's probably some sort of plant. 6 Direction is the name of the Emperor, which admittedly made me giggle, like, every single time, because I was like, it sounds like Direction. Like, I'm like, is this a really questionable One Direction cover band? I don't know. But, yeah, so it was great, but that's probably too much random little bits of information. On the whole, this is a great book, and I think maybe there's going to be more of a series coming from this. I picked it up under the impression it was a standalone. And it does stand alone quite well, but like there's plenty of stuff that isn't resolved in the big plot by the end. So there's definitely room for more story. And honestly, like, I hope she does write another book, because this was fantastic, and I would love to read more set in this particular universe. Furious Hours by Casey Sepp. Murder, Fraud, and the Last Trial of Harper Lee. All right. I love that that phrasing makes it sound like Harper Lee was on trial. Okay, so this is nonfiction, and it's about a murder. Duh. It's about a strange case of murder for insurance money that took place in the the 70s in Alabama. And basically this guy seems, I mean, there's no definitive evidence, but he seems to have killed multiple family members, 5 actually in total, in order to collect insurance money. And he had taken out insurance claims on them all that they didn't even necessarily know about, and he basically just, like, they would turn up dead in a car on the side of the road, and, like, it could never be definitively proven that he killed them. And I think one of them went to trial and he got off, and the other ones never even went anywhere. So then the 5th one, he's at this stepdaughter, her funeral, and someone else from the area shot him in the head, killed him, and then that guy went on trial and got off. And Harper Lee was trying to write a nonfiction book about this whole case, and she never succeeded in finishing it. So that's basically what this is about. I felt like the presentation of it all was a little disjointed, because the first roughly half, I guess, of the book is about the Maxwell case, and then it's about the lawyer. And the lawyer, Tom Radney, was the lawyer for Maxwell and also for the guy who killed him. And he was a state senator or something, I think, of Alabama as well. And he ran for lieutenant governor and lost, and he was interesting. But so, like, for like half the book is about this, and then it's like, how does Harper Lee fit in? And the rest of the book is about Harper Lee and her life, her time traveling to Kansas with Truman Capote while researching the case that he eventually wrote up in Cold Blood, and then just like her entire life story. And eventually she hears about this case about this Reverend Maxwell and thinks it would make a good second book. And yeah, so it's just all about her. And I thought it was a little, I don't know, I just thought it was kind of odd to end the book on the note of like, this is about Harper Lee, and to spend so much time dwelling on that, while the first half of the book barely mentions her at all. And like, sure, you know it's coming because it's in the title, but it was just a weird choice. I enjoyed it well enough. I thought it was interesting to learn about Harper Lee, and to learn about how insurance was incredibly easy to just get on people who didn't even know you had insurance on them back in the 70s and 60s. Yikes. And Tom Radney was interesting, and for some reason the whole like prologue or whatever of the book is just, let's tell you in detail about this lake that was like made from a dam, and you know, and then backed up the river and it all flooded out into this lake called Lake Martin. And it's not important at all. It has nothing to do with anything. It's just in the general area of these towns where this stuff takes place, and also I think where Harper Lee is from. She's not from the town where Maxwell lived or anything. There are different towns, but like, I think it's still in the same general area. I think. I mean, I don't know anything about Alabama. I've never been there. And I don't know that I mean, I'd like to go there someday just because I'd like to say I've been to all 50 states at least once, but like, I'm not wildly enthusiastic about anything going on in Alabama, so, you know, we'll see. I don't know, there's probably some good civil rights museum or something, but that's about it. But still, this was interesting. Like, Harper Lee was an interesting person, and also, it was sort of hard to listen to because I was just like, God, I'm vibing with this lady. Like, she, in some ways, reminds me of myself. It feels like I can kind of imagine, in some aspects, what it was like to be her. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's like, we're very different, but there are still things where I'm like, I get that. And there was some stuff about Truman Capote in here, and I don't really know much about him, but I guess I know more now. I think everything I knew about him before reading this was like, he was gay. I knew that for some reason. But still, I would recommend it. It was a good book. It was interesting. And I just thought, you know, the section's a little bit disjointed. Maybe it would have made more sense to frame it all as Harper Lee's story and start with her and kind of continue through and pepper the other stuff in. I don't know, maybe not, but it was just kind of an odd choice. But like, it didn't not work, but it did by the end of the book made me feel like, okay, but didn't we start this about a murder and then like we're barely even talking about that anymore? Like, I guess maybe there's no more to say, but it was just kind of strange. Also, I don't know what the title refers to. What are the Furious Hours? I don't remember that phrase being used in the book. It might have been, and I just forgot, but like... Anyway. Liked it, whatever. Let's move on. Real quickly, I finished reading My Bonny Light Horseman by L.A. Meyer, which is the 6th book of the Bloody Jack Adventures. So, as usual, I have another video that is the reading vlog. So. I have finished The Mint by T.E. Lawrence. This book was a lot, while also being a very little. Where do I even begin? I liked it. I did. But, it's the sort of book you read, and you just kind of feel like there's a lot of stuff in there. And, like, it would be worth reading multiple times as years go by. That it would be worth sort of dissecting. And what it is essentially a series of notes that Lawrence took while he was in sort of boot camp, I guess, for the RAF. And this is what he was doing in the 20s. I don't know. And I think the 20s, math. And it's kind of an odd trajectory for his career to take, understandably, considering I think at that time Churchill was like, hey, you could be on the cabinet if you wanted, and he was like, actually, I think I'm gonna join the RAF under a false name and just attempt to erase all of my previous identity. Sort of. Well, I mean, he still had all these friends that he wrote letters to, so it's not like he actually tried to really turn himself into someone else, but he kind of did. And it's like, why? But anyway, there's kind of a bit which I probably should not have found amusing, but did, where somebody asked him, what are you doing in the Air Force anyway? And he says, I think I had a mental breakdown, sir. And you're like, yeah, I think that is what happened. But, this book. Yeah, so basically he had the notion that he was going to become part of the RAF, and he wanted to write a book about it. And he took a bunch of notes, it's practically just like journal entries, really, about his time training. But then it didn't end up, like, his idea was that that would be the beginning of a book, which would then be about a career going on from there, but he ended up getting found out and kicked out of the Air Force for, you know, being there under a false name. And, and they probably didn't look too highly on the idea of somebody with an actual, like an actual, what is the word? I don't know, he was like a colonel or something. He was an officer, I guess, of the army? I don't know. Anyway, so then they were like, what are you doing? So then, so that's the first 2 sections of this book. And then there's a 3-year time jump, and he's basically just like, so that didn't work. And then ends up being able to join the Air Force again after several years of trying to persuade somebody to let him back in. And then it's all a bit nicer. And he ultimately did have a career in the Air Force, like, not as a pilot, just as like a regular person who who did maintenance on the machines and stuff. Like, that's kind of what it seems like they were doing. He doesn't go into a ton of detail as to what the actual job is, except at the very end of the last section. But, yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot of ways to read this book. I mean, it's information about how people were trained to be, like, members of a military organization at the time. And it's, like, something even he acknowledges, this isn't even how the RAF does it anymore, writing. As I put the book together and I'm writing the last part, like, it's not even the same anymore, it's already changed. But the RAF was, like, super new at the time, I guess. And a lot of the, I call it boot camp, he never does, I don't know if that's the right term, but the initial training is very, like, has nothing to do with anything. Like, it's just about kind of breaking everybody's will down so that they will function only when ordered to do things, and so that they will work as a unit. And then, like, he advances. In the third part, he's advanced to cadet college, which I guess is, like, the next step. I'm not really sure. But at that point, they're like, never mind. You have free will again. And they're like, how do I... So, you know, that's stupid. They shouldn't do it that way. And they probably don't anymore, but not great. So, you can read it for that kind of information as a historical document. It's also just interesting in terms of, like, a lot of just, I don't know, just the way the people talk to each other, the way they all interact. And Lawrence as a writer and a person and, like, someone who had done amazing things and then felt like he'd failed, I guess, at least somewhat, and wanted very badly to just be ordinary? I don't know, I don't want to psychoanalyze the guy, but it just seems kind of suggestive of just being like, actually, please, I would like to just be like everybody else. And as somebody who did not seem to be in a good place at all for the majority of this book. I mean, the first 2 sections, they do take course over, you know, a few months' time, I think. So, like, it's not unreasonable, you know, that he's still kind of in the same mental place throughout that entire section. But, yeah, not doing great. I mean, it begins with him going to, like, this medical inspection so that they can let him into the RAF, and it's kind of unfair because, like, he has somebody that he knows who has agreed, yeah, you can get in, and I'll make them let you in. And, I mean, to be fair to him, he does the work and all of that, and he does all the training, but, like, you kind of feel like maybe they wouldn't have let him in right at the beginning. He doesn't quite meet the minimum height requirement, and he's just not well. And he hasn't been eating enough, which is something the doctor examining him notices right away, which, like, not for any real good reason, I don't think. I think he just kind of had food problems. And I don't know, there's just a lot in the book where his mental state's not the best. It's kind of a lot to read, but just as a person recovering from just a lot of different stresses. But it's interesting because then in the third section, he explains that the third section, he's in this cadet college and some years have passed, like 3 years have passed, and he's putting the last section together from letters, I think, mostly, that he wrote otherwise. This is going to be the longest fucking clip, I'm sorry. But, like, I get this guy, I don't know, he's fascinating. So, anyway, so the third section's a bit different, but, like, you know, I just finished this book, and, like, there are some, he really finds happiness, ultimately, and, like, I feel like, for some reason, that made me really sad. Anyway, I don't know, it was kind of tough. And for a couple of really clear reasons at the end, too. Like, there's this wonderful chapter right toward the end of the book where he's talking about this motorcycle. He's got this motorcycle, and he goes and he rides the motorcycle around the countryside, and he has an absolutely wonderful time. He clearly loves it. And you're like, this makes me sad, because I'm glad you love it. I'm glad you found something you love. I'm sad that it's what killed you. And then it ends with, I don't know, just some, it's happy. It's happy. I should be happy about it. I don't know. It just ends with this thing where he's talking about the service as a concept, and like, that's something I don't get at all. I have no inclination, no desire to be part of something like that. But I think it's the fact that it ends with him happy and having found somewhere where he fits and somewhere where he wants to continue on. As someone that I know had spent, you know, previous years genuinely just wanting to die. Not to the degree where I think he would have actually done anything about it, but like, still, he was like, death kind of sounds nice, and it's like, Jesus. But I don't know. I'm being stupid about this, but anyway. It was a good book. Was it a good book? That's a good question. I mean, it's kind of fragmented, it's kind of strange. I find some of it just so hard to understand, because I either don't understand a lot of the words, or just the way he chooses to phrase things is kind of murky, and you're like, please, can you please be clearer? But I don't know. I liked it. I'm gonna shut the hell up about this book in a second, but I will, one last note is that he says in his note in between parts 2 and 3 that I think just kind of part of his thing was that he'd always wanted to write a real book, and was, I think, in the end disappointed with 7 Pillars as a book. And I'm like, look, it's not perfect, bro, but it's not a bad book. It's a good book. It's more than most people would accomplish. Like, you don't have to be fucking perfect to be worthwhile. Anyway, none of this matters. This is the longest clip. I'm sorry, but hey. I'm really glad I read it.